Welcome to What Resonates. This podcast is about tuning into energy, intuition, and what feels true for you. Each conversation invites you to notice what sparks curiosity and feels aligned, opening a wider field of possibility for yourself and for humanity. Keep tuning in and follow What Resonates. Are you a Reiki practitioner wanting to build your very own Reiki business and grow your income? My Reiki Business Success course gives you the practical tools and heart-centered strategies in a step-by-step structure that is my signature Root to Bloom method. And you'll use that to build a thriving Reiki business with integrity. It's self-paced, it's real-life friendly, and you receive lifetime access so you can revisit the content at any point. Ready to take the leap? Visit mainstreamreiki.com and enroll today. Welcome to What Resonates. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy, and it is a pleasure for me to welcome back Tina Zion. She's a lifelong and fourth-generation intuitive, author, and teacher, specializing in medical intuition and mediumship. Tina brings a grounded and practical approach to working with the spirit world. An award-winning author, Tina has just released her final book, Healing Ghosts, Haunted Places, and Non-Human Beings. It's a comprehensive training manual designed to help people step into multidimensional healing and succeed with confidence. She continues to teach international and is known for helping students develop their intuitive skills in real, repeatable ways. Tina, I just adore you. You have produced so many fabulous works and contributions over the years, and a lot of Reiki people know you from back in the day. You taught Reiki and wrote a couple of books on that subject as well. And so thank you so much for saying yes and coming back.
Well, and I thank you. My goodness, this is a joy, and I'm glad to see you now. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. And in the intro, I mentioned you've decided that this new book, is your last book. And so you had to say it all in this book. And I will tell you, I learned some wonderful things about you, some fascinating things. And you open the book with such personal stories about yourself, about your life, and several different experiences that have to do with death, quite frankly. Personal stories, brushes with death, I guess is how we might say that. Can you share one of those? I mean, there's so much there in that one section, these 5 examples, but could you pick one and share about it and how that shaped your life? What did you feel called to do as a result, if anything?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I am probably one of the most private people you will ever meet or interact with. And so it was very, very hard for me to divulge such things, all these things in my life. But I decided to do it because I've had so much experience with death, and then my near-death time that I had in New Zealand. And I thought, well, maybe I should share these things because I think it will help people understand that maybe I know what I'm talking about because I've done that, I've done and had this experience. So probably in the one in New Zealand would be the one that I actually literally left my body. What I would want to share mostly with people is it was the most exhilarating, joyful, lovely experience. I saw others, floating along with me. And we were literally heading to this big bright light that was up there on the upper right of my vision at that time. And there, were children and babies and middle-aged people and old people and things like that. And I was just one with this group. But I was seeing these stunning lights that are colors that we don't even have a name for. And probably the most wonderful thing I experienced was I could hear voices like harmonizing, just humming, not singing words, but humming. And that would all blend together. It was beautiful. And I still think that I was hearing angels singing, basically, which is a common thing that we hear about angels. And then was back in my body in the hospital bed in New Zealand. I was in Auckland. And it's always with me. I remember it always. And what I hope to do is to help people in all kinds of ways, help them with their process, help them. There's a death doulas now, and I don't teach that in particular, but to assist people in knowing about this process, but also because I always want to teach people to be healers for others. That's really my goal with medical intuition and mediumship. And so I just love that. And I'm surprised, actually, you're the first one to bring up how I shared my personal life with people. And so that would be the one that I'd like to share with you since you asked me that.
Uh, I appreciate it so much. There was just such a rawness. When I read that part of the book, it did strike me. And the other thing that stands out, and I would say every time we've ever interacted, and when I've read your books, and I was in your Ann Arbor class, your medical intuition class in Ann Arbor before the pandemic, I guess. I have some real world experience with you, but your mission to help and be helpful, it just really is consistent and it comes through everything, that I have been
Mm.
involved with or been touched by you. So I do, want to let you know that this helpful drive that you seem
Mm.
to exude, it does connect.
Bless your heart. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. And now this book is, very different because you're tackling some topics with this one where there's a lot of fear and a lot of, I'm going to say,
Yeah.
misunderstanding as well, which that's kind of related with fear, isn't it, in this regard?
Always. Always, yes.
And so, what was your primary mission with this book? It being your last book, and then tackling these, I'm going to say, sketchier kind of topics, ghosts, healing ghosts, and you even have some information about non-human beings in there. So this is really getting, outside what a lot of people might be aware of. And again, they have fear. So what was your main purpose in writing the book?
Oh, I don't know if I can narrow it down to one, but you've already brought it up, is to absolutely remove the fear and sometimes terror of the death process. But also, my other goal would be to teach people that they can assist others, that they can actually assist their living clients. They can assist the deceased clients, because if I am with a deceased person, whether I'm with a living client or just the deceased person, I want to find out if they need help. I want to find out, have they crossed over and they're absolutely fine? They're just coming back for a visit, or are they stuck here? Because there's a reason why there are so many haunted ghost TV shows now where the Ghostbusters or whatever they call themselves. I have lots of things to say about that, but I want to always be the assistant. I want to be the helper. I don't want to go in and try to irritate a deceased person who's caught up in a horrible old building somewhere. I always say the deceased is just as alive as we are. And I hope I said that in my book. I think I did, but because they're real and they're just as alive as we are. So I want to help the living and help the deceased.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that, that they're just as alive as we are? Because I think that that could help people in their perspective.
Yes. Well, because the aliveness in us, like the two of us sitting here sharing back and forth with each other, that aliveness is really our eternal soul. We are eternal souls, even when we're sitting here on the earth plane in our physical body, but that aliveness continues. And so when we release the physical body in what we call the death process, we are just as alive because that eternal soul is who we really are. And so I really emphasize that in my courses that I teach, is that this being is not just somebody there scaring you, that this being either wants or needs something. And this being is an actual alive individual, a live soul, a live spirit. And there's really nothing to be afraid of. What I teach, one of the main things I teach, I hope, is to really be in charge and to not have any fear. That if someone wakes you up in the middle of the night, which happens to me frequently, by the way, that you don't go into fear. You see, well, okay, here you are. What do you want or what do you need? And then I hope I teach people how to, once you say those things to a deceased person, my goodness, stop and give them a moment to answer. And so that's really what I'm trying to get across. And then probably another thing that I notice, see, I just write books about things I keep noticing and the things that I keep noticing that works and things like that. But a lot of people, what happens to them when they cross over or leave their body, I'll put it that way, leave their body, really depends on the emotion that they're having right then and there. And I didn't really realize that until I was writing this book, and that's why I added that. I thought, no, wait a minute. People who were struggling, who were in a horrible place and left their body in that moment, do not tend to go into the light, as we call it. They tend to get caught up here in the physical realm. And so we can help them. So I do realize, I'm beginning to realize even more that I have a different perspective on it. But bottom line is, I want the living to not be afraid anymore of the deceased.
And their own death. I mean, it all goes together, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's what my hope was too, is that this takes the fear out of the reader's own process.
Mm.
And I've had other not so I didn't leave my body in my other experiences, but I've been just violently ill. So I started asking my guides, why have I had these dramatic situations where I'm on the edge of death, and then the one in New Zealand where I did leave my body? And they said that I was in training, and basically to write this particular book to really help normalize it and remove the fear that most people have.
I think that it can be world changing when more people release those fears. I really believe that because I think it's fears like that that keep us thinking that we're limited or that we can't venture into different areas of study or practice that we may not be familiar with. I mean, even in the field of Reiki, there are people afraid of Reiki because, something is going to jump off the client and get them or something. And all of these things are unfounded, but we've had this veil of, mystery, and we didn't talk about things like we do today. And so again, that's the book, and what you delve into just helps peel back, that layer, I will say. But you mentioned spirit guides, Tina, and in your book, you outline 6 types of specialized guides. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that, because spirit guides, out in the spiritual community, it's such a huge topic. And people are talking about them all over the place. And, my spirit team this and my
Yes.
spirit team that. And so I'd love to get your perspective on spirit guides.
That's really a big topic and a very, very important topic to me. So I think the best way I could discuss it is to share my own experience. And because my own experiences are always what, the general population is having too. But what I noticed is I have worked with non-physical beings that I thought were guides because they were hanging around me. They seemed pleasant and all this and that. And I would talk to them and ask them for help, and just like everybody else does. And then I got to realizing that some of these so-called guides were simply deceased people. And one of the main points that I want to pick out to share is that just because we leave our physical body doesn't mean we've become advanced. We pretty much leave our physical body and become our eternal soul at the level of advancement that we're at here on earth. And so then the next thing that happened that I was realized is that the two words, divine and sacred, those two words just started hammering at me. I would hear them driving down the road, those two words, sacred and divine, divine, sacred, sacred and divine. And I would go to bed, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and there's those two words. So I said, all right, all right. Why am I being bombarded with these two words? And what I received was that most people are working with deceased people who are not very advanced. And they said, at least in the English language, those two words narrow it down to work with the most advanced, highest level, I guess you'd say, or wise, the most wise beings. And so I thanked my lower level guides and the deceased people who I thought were guides. I thanked them because they were doing their best, but I asked them to please leave. And I started calling in using those words. A divine and sacred God who specializes in whatever specialist I needed or wanted at the time. My life just became unbelievably amazing. And I thought, wait a minute, this has made a giant difference. I got to teach this now because I'd already been teaching various things for probably 30 years. I got to start teaching this. And so I started including it in medical intuition. I started including it in my mediumship classes. The people are just, I think some of them are shocked about the difference that it makes. And it never occurred to me years ago. Now, wait a minute. Deceased people aren't really guides. They're deceased people. I mean, I have my grandma Marie, my great grandma Della, and so I don't chase them away. They are my loved ones. And so they come and go, but they're not guides. I would never work with Grandma Marie to assist somebody in a medical intuition session, or a healing session. She's just my personal helper. And she's crossed over. And so that's a whole nother thing that I talk to people about is when we cross over. A lot of people think that we're gone, but keep finding that once we've crossed over, we have more flexibility to come and go here from the earth plane to we'll call it the heavens, to the earth plane to the heavens, that we have even more flexibility. So that's kind of a long answer to your question, I think, but that's what's coming up. That marvelous. I can't even describe the difference that happened in my life, but also in other people's lives when they've released the lower level and we're going with divine and sacred.
That in and of itself, I think is worth the price of admission, for hitting the play button on this show, because what a beautiful highlight, because I think there are so many people who think any guidance is like amazing and they should just be so blessed to receive anything. Yeah, give yourself permission to ask for higher, right? So, yeah, we're not after breadcrumbs or accidental encounters. Let's have
No.
purpose and let's really make our requests with some intention.
Since you mentioned that, um, I'm listening to my guides right now, by the way, and they think it would be really positive for your listeners to realize too that I have a team of guides just for myself. I have teams for the clients that I've worked with over the years. But for people that say, oh, I can't do this, I'm religious. Well, one of my divine sacreds is Jesus. One of my divine and sacreds is Mother Mary. I've got a plaque of her up here. I'm looking at him on my wall. And it's not about religion, you know, that they came readily. I didn't even call them. They just came readily when I again use that divine and sacred terms.
What about doing this work, assembling a team and helping people? What is necessary for people to help to heal ghosts?
What is necessary?
Right, because do they need to be a healer? Do they need to be practicing? I don't know. I mean, can anybody do these things and have these conversations? Obviously, we can all have spirit guides and request those sacred and divine guides, but implementing in the world, because a lot of people are currently feeling called to help in a higher way here on earth. There's so much change and such great need. And isn't it true, Tina? People are becoming more sensitive to, psychically tuning in, seeing things, hearing things. That's not an
Yeah.
accident. It's not an accident. So if people are experiencing an opening of their senses, but, they're just living the mainstream life and they're not sure what to do, I guess my question is this book and what's in it, who is the audience for that? Who can put that into action, and be helpful given what you've included in there?
Whew. I don't I don't know that I can narrow it down, but there is a great now huge number of people that identify themselves as energy workers. And that is like an overview of all kinds of modalities that they put into practice as energy workers. Reiki is one of them, but Reiki is only one of many. And so I would say that this, even for energy workers, I don't care if you've been doing it for 20 years, that working with the divine and sacreds will take your work to a whole different level. I also want to really express to people that we are very powerful and to be very ethical. In fact, I start most of my courses when I begin to teach a class that I'm about to teach you how powerful you are. And I cannot make you be ethical about your abilities, but I sure can beg you to be ethical about your abilities. But I hope that people will take these abilities that we have and assist people in their own healing, whatever healing means to your clients, because healing means, that word is kind of vague now and it means all kinds of things. So I'm not sure if that answered your question. So energy workers, absolutely. I also hope that people who are afraid, that wake up in the night and they know spirit person sitting on the end of their bed. I have lots of stories about that, by the way, that sitting on the end of their bed or standing there looking at them or something, that to take the fear out of that. And one of the things I teach too is how to communicate, because, I'll work with someone who's lost their husband or vice versa. And they'll say, oh, I talk and talk and talk to him, and I, because missing our spouses and things like that. And I talk and talk to him. And here's what I say, have you stopped and listened? Because he's trying to respond to you. And people go, no, it never occurred to me. I said, well, he's standing here, trying to tell you stuff right now. So to help people learn the details of communicating is what I hoped to get across in that book. So really, I can't narrow it down to just energy workers. I hope it's anybody that's been afraid of the non-physical, that kind of knows it's real, but tries to ignore it. That it's just part of our life. It's part of my life. It's part of my family's life. It's part of anyone's life who will allow it.
Yeah, what struck me when I was listening to you is, perhaps it's about people who are ready to step into the power that they have, regardless. Because that
Very
spouse,
cool.
the spouse, they're ready to step into their ability to hear spirit, to hear the deceased at that time, which, 30 years prior, they'd have probably thought, or possibly thought that would be rubbish or whatever it is. But because the situation is different, their perspective is shifted. And then they feel perhaps called to talk to the deceased. But I love your example because I think it's so um, common that the listening, right? And people often don't think that they'll
Yeah.
be able to hear. And so maybe they just, it doesn't occur to them.
Yeah, and one of the things I teach in my mediumship course is how do you hear it? And it's not as hard as it seems.
No, I think, I don't know, don't you find or do you find that your students are looking for like the lightning bolt moment? Like the clouds are going to part and, a beam of light is going to descend and, the angels will sing. And it's really pretty mundane when it comes down to it.
Those things do happen occasionally, but for the most part, it's just as simple as you wake up in the night and a spirit is standing there wanting or needing something. They're not trying to get you or kill you or anything. They want or need something, those two things.
You mentioned you had a lot of stories about that. I think it would be really helpful if you don't mind sharing some of what has happened because we're talking about these things in more of a general sense, but maybe if we ground it in real world experience and what has occurred, maybe that would help people connect with this idea.
Okay. Well, a very simple one I would think to begin with is I had a wicker chair in my corner of my bedroom, and when we sit on wicker, most of us have, it makes a wicker chair sound. You can tell. So was going to bed, and this happened multiple nights. That it sounded like someone was sitting down after I got into bed. Someone was sitting on the wicker chair. I didn't think anything about it, and I just gone to sleep. And then one night I thought, no, wait a minute. I looked over and there was this very handsome, very gentle feeling man who was sitting there. And I said, have you been making all this sound with the wicker chair? And he said, yes. And I said, well, why are you here? And he said, well, I don't really know. And then he said, well, there was just all this light from your house kind of drew me. And I said to him, do you realize that because he had crossed over and for some reason he was just coming back. And so I said, well, do you realize that you are sitting in a woman's bedroom and that is really not really appropriate? And he said, yes. And off he off he went. You can't, I keep telling, one of the things I say all the time is you can't make this stuff up. So that's one. Let me share another that keeps coming up is I woke up and there were three spirit people standing there. There was a man and two women kind of behind him. And you could tell that by the clothing that they were in, it's maybe the early 1900s or maybe even late 1800s. And I opened up my eyes and I looked at them. And the man says, we are here to see the doctor. And I said, well, I'm a nurse, but I'm not a doctor. So see, just common sense communication is kind of what's coming up here. Common sense communication. And I had just been at the hospital to see somebody. So whenever I'm at the hospital or even anybody that comes to visit me, if they've been to the hospital, they tend to bring deceased people with them and kind of stay in my house while the living people leave. And so they just came with me and I didn't notice it until they woke me up in the night. And so they had not crossed over and you can tell, lots of details about that. And so I assisted them in realizing that they haven't crossed over, realizing their needs. And I assisted them, and I have very detailed easy steps about how to do that. And I assisted them to cross over into the light just right then. Then I rolled over and went to sleep. So and as soon as the wicker chair guy, he left, I just went back to sleep. So it's so normal that it's like talking to the neighbor on the other side of the fence. It's literally just like talking to your neighbors or talking to somebody in line at the grocery store. And my goal is to normalize this for people and take this shock and fear out.
Oh my goodness. I could say so many things, but one of the things I want to ask is one of the things I want to ask is, are they watching us when we're naked in the bathroom and stuff? I mean, what's
Yes,
the level of
sometimes they
interest
are.
there?
Yes.
Really? Oh my. I
Well, yes, but what I want to people to really hear first is we are in charge, and they, for whatever reason, they will do what we tell them to do if we mean it. And, no, I'm taking a shower. You get out of this room now. I will meet you in the sunroom when I'm dressed. See, I even get irritated about it. And they'll do it. They'll do
Wow.
it.
Now, isn't that
Yeah, you're the
what
boss.
you just said? Isn't that one of the laws, for lack of a better term, that people really need to consider? And that is sovereignty, that you are a boss of in your energy and your space.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think that is one of the key things that will take the fear of this away. Even look at these simple stories that I just told that my guides are even saying right now that's going to bring a lot of relief to some of your listeners.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just normal everyday stuff.
I just absolutely love how your stories are always practical and so down to earth.
Mm.
Do you know that you being in my bedroom in the middle of the night is inappropriate? I mean, I just love it. I love it.
Oh,
So,
you can see that he really heard that, and yeah.
yeah, it's just amazing. And so I love this conversation, how it's so real. And I think people can understand and wrap their head around it. And I want to stick with this boss idea a little bit more because, as you just mentioned, I think it is the direct counter to so much of the fear. When people can step
Yes.
into that authority, that they control their energy, they control what is influencing them, that is the game changer, I think. So if you could talk a little bit more about that, and are there limitations at all with that in with the spirit world and non-human beings?
Well, I think that being the boss is the most important. I don't know, maybe there's a better word for it, but if you're the director, that's another word that I use for it. I'm even amazed a lot of times that they will, you have to mean it, when you say it, and they will, because they're real people. We're talking about real beings that are alive, and they're still have their thinking mind, apparently, from my experience, and that they will do what we direct them to do. Now, I do say this, that if you tell someone to leave your bedroom and I will meet you at the kitchen table, in 8 o'clock in the morning, please do it because they're real people. So, and people, when I'm teaching that in a class, people will laugh, but they're real people, and to do what you say you're going to do also is very, very, very important. So you have to remind me what your question was. I had to say that because my guys were telling me to, but tell me again, what was the question?
Well, this idea of being the director and being sovereign and not being a victim, to all the energies around us. I was saying that that is, I think, absolutely a game changer for people. But and you did address that, but I followed up with, are there limitations to that? And you did say that you have to mean it, but what about, are
Yes.
there entities, are there energies that really are vicious, that they really are up to no good, that we're not a match
Yes.
for?
Yes, absolutely. And I understand your question better now. That absolutely, because if they were a terrible person in the living and they died, they left their body for whatever reason, they still vibrate at that level. they still have those same thoughts because, again, they're just as alive as they were in the physical body. A lot of people think once we pass on, we go become angels or something, and that's just not my experience. And so, yes, you will come across deceased spirit beings that are just as nasty, horrible as they were in the living. And all you have to do is realize even more deeply that you are in charge, even with these very negative dead people. And they too will follow what you tell them to do. Thank goodness. I don't really know why that is, but you just have to give them more direction and you call in. See, I'm not doing this all by myself, too. And I haven't mentioned that in our talk today, that I never work alone. I'm working with my team. Let's say I am having an experience with a very negative deceased person. I just call in a divine and sacred guide who specializes in this particular horrible deceased person. And then I direct the guides what to do too. And so,
Ah,
see, even if you're with a deceased person who's trying to just scare the heck out of you, there's no reason to be afraid. They're just more messed up, I would say, than the man sitting in my wicker chair. Yeah, so there's bad people in the living, and when they pass on, most of the time they're still just as bad as they were in the living. And those are the ones I want to help even more.
yeah, I do very much love that you said that because isn't that where the healing is really very much needed?
Yes. And, we haven't really talked about that yet, but my goal is to teach people how powerful they are. And everyone is a medium. We can do this. Is not a gift. I must say that this is not a gift, but everyone has this ability to help a needy deceased and to bring a healing to them. And I do that back to a woman that maybe has lost her husband to bring a healing. Sometimes the husband hasn't crossed over because there was struggles in their marriage or whatever. I'm kind of making things up, but they're real examples to assist them and communicate. See, you're also the bridge for communicating between the living and the deceased and bringing closure a lot of times so that the deceased can cross over.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what it means to cross over and not cross over and come back? Can you give us some context about that?
You have the greatest questions. Yes. Well, I use the term crossing over because it's the most common one that I hear from all different religions. Because I'm working with, I'm teach internationally, so I work with people from all kinds of religious backgrounds and things. And it tends to be a term that a lot of people use. And so I just use that. But it's when we actually release all the earth plane stuff, is how I would put it simply. That if we really release the heartache, I didn't make as much money as I should have, just whatever's bothering the living person when they release that body to actually release all the emotions, all the struggles, and realize that there is learning to do on other levels. When we leave this body, we do have a choice. Do we learn on different levels? Because we're sure, hopefully learning on earth, but it's not the only place to learn.
That's very helpful. So, crossing over, you shed all of the pettiness, I guess I'll say. No,
Hmm.
that was kind of judgmental, but the emotions and the grudges and all of that is released.
Yes.
But then,
Or not. Not
or
always
not.
released. That's what keeps deceased people here on is emotion,
Mm.
the density of emotion. I'll put it that way.
But then once they do cross over, they can still come back, is what you're saying too. They can come back and
Yes,
like your
yeah, I've noticed
grandmother.
there's more freedom.
Yes. Huh. Now, you also mention in the book extraterrestrials. And, we're hearing a lot about extraterrestrials these days, and there's a lot out there. And I would be very curious to learn what your understanding of extraterrestrials and humans are at this time? What have you seen and experienced about them?
By extraterrestrials, most people think of the grays, the big black eyes and stuff. But I think what you're referring to is any non-human being is what I think.
In your book, you talk about the subject of extraterrestrials. So just inviting a little illumination, in the context of that.
Yes, I love that you're bringing that up. In fact, we humans tend to think, even my own family, who are all mediums, we all thought it was the most natural thing in the world is to see and talk to our deceased and then call everybody up to say, oh, Grandma Marie showed up in her leopard skin boots, and things like that. So that is very, very, very normal. But what I love to bring up is that so many people think that when we leave our physical body, we're the only beings in the non physical world. And it's just not my experience. And I have students in my classes come to me and say, I'm thinking of one particular story. This young man who had been a massage therapist for, I think he said 8 or 10 years. He was working with this very frail woman. In fact, he was a big husky guy and was worried about injuring her. And he suddenly, after 10 years of not perceiving anything, he suddenly saw this non-human being pulling energy from this woman. And he was terrified. He was terrified. So, if he was making this up or was nutty or something, he would have seen these things a long time ago since he's a massage therapist. But it was with this one woman. And so that's just one tiny, tiny example that we are not the only non-physical beings in the universe or the cosmos, that there are all kinds of, and some are very, very positive. The best ones that everybody knows and probably talks about are angels. That's a non-human being, and they are very, very real. And there's also very negative, just like here on the earth plane, there are very, very positive people and very, very negative people. It's the same in the non-physical world, that there are other types of beings, and some of them are very, very positive, and some of them are ornery, like leprechauns. I have perceived leprechauns actually in Ireland, and even I was surprised at that when I was in Ireland. And so my other goal in these courses and with my book is to help people realize they are real. Even they're not human, but they are also real. But for some reason, thank goodness, they have to do what we direct them to do too. You have to be the boss, like I said. And they, I'll say this, that some of them are quite ugly and scary. And I hope, if anything, your listeners hear this out of the whole conversation. This is the most important thing. Ugly and mean and strange looking does not mean powerful. It just means they're ugly and strange looking. It does not mean they're more powerful than us. But people tend to think they're more powerful just because they're big and ugly, I guess. But they will do what you tell them to do too. And so I help them to realize things and to also do the crossing over into the light. It could be, and
And
most of them are very, very needy also. Ugly, but needy.
right, yeah, it's kind of like the bully on the playground, is often the weakest
Oh, yeah.
person. Yeah.
Yes.
And you give resources, you give steps in your book to how to work with these things and how to do this. So people will be equipped
Yes.
in handling these things, which I
Yes.
love. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yes, I don't want to I don't want to just talk about general concepts in my classes or my books. I want to give people information, and this is what you do. Bam, 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 step 1 to 10 or something,
Yes.
to really learn how to do it, not just me chattering about things.
Yeah, and what's coming in for me, and I ignored it a few minutes ago, so I'm gonna go ahead and say it. And that is this idea of boundaries and, what we say has to go. They have to follow that. What it's reminding me
Yeah.
of is in our lives, how many of us don't say, what we want, or we allow ourselves to be taken advantage of, or we don't speak up and we don't, just in normal life. And so I'm seeing such a parallel between the spirit world and our earthly world. And so, you know what? Maybe it's an invitation for us to step into our power with living people too. And just across the board.
That's one of the most beautiful things that you could possibly say. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm kind of on this trip lately about power and sovereignty and all of this. So it just dovetails beautifully
Mhm.
into what's really been coming up for me lately. Um, wow. What about our children today? I look back when you started your life and what you've shared about it before. Your family was supportive. Your family had all of these, and I don't want to say gifts, but abilities to be mediums, and they were so tapped in. Today, it seems like our children are different than children brought into the world 50 years ago. I wonder if you could speak about that and how we can support our children today.
Well, I would say in general to recognize that they are different and to tell them what you're noticing about how different they are, because they're different because the whole earth, the whole planet and the human population is all evolving. So, they should be different in many, many ways, or that evolution wouldn't be apparent like it is. I have 5 grandkids now from all ages, and they are very, very different. And it's okay. I point out how different they are in very positive ways, but to recognize it and to allow it. My family did for each other and for me is to normalize the non-physical world. Even my uncle was a Lutheran minister, and on Sundays, he was there at the pulpit. I thought we all went to church to see my uncle glow, by the way, because he would just turn into this beautiful milky white angelic glow ball. You can see auras, I can see auras, and so can everybody. And I thought we all went to see Uncle Bob glow on Sundays, but then on Thursday evenings, lots of times he was at the spiritualist church too. And so it was a blending with all of that. But so my family, what they gave to me was not a gift, because this is not a gift. It's an ability, is all it is. But they gave to me how normal it is. And I really hope I got that through in my book too, about this is really normal. It's not to be feared. It's not to try to keep away from in the middle of the night. No, it's just normal.
I have so much hope too because, you've got grandchildren and I meet people all the time and they even have small children and their perspectives and their viewpoints and what they are exploring in the spiritual realm, all the different topics and modalities and things like that. What a potential for these children to grow up with parents who are so much more open-minded and educated with this type of material. And so you writing all the different books and the courses, but I think especially this one, I just have to say, because it is step by step, it is grounded, it is helpful, and it is a manual, very, very true to the title, really. And having resources like that, I think is just a game changer on the planet. And normalizing, that is just the word that just is so illuminated for me in talking to you. And acceptance, just acceptance of all the different energies, that it is what it is, and accepting ourselves, our own personal power, And what an exciting time to be alive. And I thank you so much for all that you have contributed for so many different people. And I just really want to thank you, Tina, and ask you, is there one last thing that you'd want to communicate to the audience?
Yes, I would say that each of us can be healers, no matter what your background, your interests. We can be healers for each other, the living. We can be healers for the deceased, and we can be healers for the non-human beings, the non-physical humans as well. And there's a lot of need out there, and so we can assist with that.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. And if people want to find out more about all the different things that you offer, your courses and your books, and contact you, where can they best do that?
My website it used to be other names, but what I found is, and I'm supposed to say this to some of your listeners, is just my name. So it's www.tinazion.com. So it's really easy to find. And I try to get my books and my courses on there. I've got some that I'm, even for the next year coming up, I'm booked. And so just please go to my website. And if you would sign up for my newsletters, I have two of them. I have one for general information about, intuition and medical intuition and mediumship. And the other one is for Reiki. So please sign up for my newsletters.
Oh, fantastic. Great resources right in your inbox all the time. So thank you so much again, Tina. What a joy it is. And I love how you just keep busy and you just keep putting yourself out there. Thank you so much.
I just keep going. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in. Keep trusting your truth, keep listening to your inner wisdom, and keep following what resonates. To sign up for the newsletter, leave a review, or connect, visit whatresonatspodcast.com. You'll also find everything linked in the show notes.